Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Rochelle Rook along with Brian Grete with Pro Farmer. Mixed closes in both grain and livestock futures trade today. And let's talk just briefly about the WASDE first of all. When you looked at the numbers, unchanged ending stocks for both corn and soybeans, when does USDA rectify that balance sheet, especially with the quarterly stocks?
Yeah, so the anticipation was that they would cut both ending stocks for corn and soybeans, and I think that that will come as we move forward. They basically punted and bought themselves some time as they sort through the exports. So seasonally, we're seeing the soybean exports decline. We're seeing the corn exports starting to pick up the pace. The flurry of Chinese purchases over the past month. Um, so I think USDA will buy themselves some time here, and maybe next month reflect that. The other thing to keep in mind is that trying to sort out as we get into the May report, when we get the first estimates for the new crop marketing year or the first projections. So I think that USDA did just kind of kick the can down the road, so to speak, this month, and we'll wait. Maybe that means bigger changes on a larger scale when we get to the May report.
The only adjustment that they made on domestic ending stocks was in wheat, raising it 30 million bushels. But the surprising part was that it came from feed use and not exports.
Right, and our estimate isn't quite as high as what USDA went to at the 598 million bushels this month. So we anticipate that maybe they overshot it a little bit, but once again, I think the surprise, like you said, was the exports. Everybody kind of anticipated that the exports would be cut because the pace has been so poor, and they didn't do that. They took it out of feed use instead, and so maybe there is some adjustments as we move forward into the end of this marketing year for wheat.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what we're trading going forward here. Of course, the corn market right now is looking ahead at, whether we're going to get 92 million acres of corn planted. And I guess what's your thought about that, Brian, especially with all of the snowpack that we have up in the northern plains?
Well, first off, our acreage survey was almost right in line with where USDA came in on its estimate, so that didn't surprise us at all. I think the bigger question now, like you mentioned, is all that flooding that we're going to see in the northern plains, northwestern corn belt, upper Midwest. That how much does that slow down corn planting? How much does that impact the actual acreage? And the other areas down in the southeast and mid south, not as much flooding there. Um, and probably is going to be shorter term than what it'll be up in those northern states. But there are some question marks on the corn acreage side of things as we move through spring here.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, old crop ending stocks are still pretty tight and maybe tighter than what USDA's print today would suggest because of what cash basis levels have been doing. So at some point, do you see the cash market doing the work or the old crop futures moving higher, and then does that pull the new crop along, or what happens there?
So I think that the futures market is pretty evenly priced at the moment based on the fundamentals. I do think that the cash market will probably have to do more of the heavy lifting, so to speak, as we move through the end of the marketing year. And that's typically the case anyway. The futures usually do the work up front, and then the cash market does the work at the end of the marketing year. So that would be pretty typical, and I think that that's something that we will see. Now, there could be a new crop influence there as well. So if we don't get, or the market perceives that we won't get all 92 million acres planted to corn, then there may be an old crop play for that new crop marketing year as well. And,
Gotcha.
and that'll show up in the spreads between the old crop and new crop spreading.
Right. Okay, so the cuts that we saw in Argentina production for both corn and soybeans, those were already kind of worked into prices, do you feel like, in both corn and beans?
Absolutely. The private estimates have been there for a while now, and USDA is just playing catch up. And that's typically the case on the international scene with USDA. They're slower to react than some of the private estimates and the estimates coming out of the individual countries. So, not too surprising there.
So Argentina, though, may limit some of their exports. Is that right? Is that what helped move the soybean market?
Yeah, and I think it's news like that could actually put a charge into soybean futures. That delay was for 60 days. Exporters can take an extra 60 days to fulfill their soy commitments. The other thing is that we had a strike just recently with some of the grain inspectors that ended last week. It was short term, but I anticipate that we'll see more of those striking type of situations. So anything like that could get into the market and give us some price support, short term, I think is something that's kind of unknown at the moment, but could definitely have a price impact.
Okay. From a technical standpoint, old crop corn and beans both ran up into chart resistance today, didn't they, again?
Yeah, and if we push above those, then you start to see more of the speculative buying come in. If you don't, then you probably see the speculators back off a little bit, and so those technical levels, both the short and long term, and even the intermediate term moving averages come into play, and will help dictate price action from day to day and week to week as we sort through some of these fundamentals here.
Lots of things to watch there. Okay, cattle market. New contract highs, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the April took out the 2014 record as far as the front month. And so where do we go from here? Because I'm already hearing of higher cash bids than we had last week.
Yeah, absolutely. The cash market's on fire. It posted a new all-time high, took out the 2014 high last week. Like you said, it projected to be higher again this week, and all signs point that way. If anything, I think that as strong as the cash fundamentals are and the technicals are right now, traders are being conservative with their long positions. We've actually got front-end futures trading below last week's cash trade, and really conservative in here. But when you get up into rarefied air, typically the trader does get a little bit more skittish. They start to doubt how much higher it can go. And I think that the cash fundamentals obviously are bullish. It's going to be demand that determines how high this thing goes and how far we beat these all-time highs by as we move through this year.
But Brian, we're not even into the tightest supplies yet, and we're already at these highs.
Yeah, seasonally we should post our high somewhere between now and mid-May to late May. So we're into that window where you typically would see your seasonal high. I think that's maybe what's got the trade a little bit skittish. That and the fact that we're at price levels we've never seen before.
Right.
And like I said, when you get up into those levels, new all-time highs, it does cause just a little bit of trepidation anyway.
And despite that, Hogs cannot seem to catch on the cash side of things at all. And do we have to bottom that cash market before futures can really move higher?
Yeah, I think we do. And USDA cut $5 off its average cash hog price for this year. And that's a big month-to-month change, reflective of some of the price trends that we've seen, but also the supply outlook based on the March 1 Hogs and Pigs report. And so the market's still dealing with some of that there. Much like the cattle market and beef trade, I think that this one's going to come down to demand and how much demand. In the case of pork specifically from China, because we have seen the Chinese pork imports start to increase. That started in late 2022 and has continued here through the first quarter of 2023.
Thanks so much for joining us, Brian Grete with Pro Farmer. That is Markets Now.